Question: what are you a fan of? Is it a movie, a book, a TV show, a music group, a sports team, or maybe something less conventional? I'm Reagan.
And I'm Christian. We've spent over 10 years working in the customer service and entertainment industries. It's this experience which leads us to believe that everyone has a compelling, personal connection to the things that they are a fan of.
And we're here to uncover the secret fandoms of the Gulf Coast's VIPs. Join us as we talk with passionate fans about what they love. On this episode of Fantastic People, we talk with Taylor Palmer. Taylor is a successful real estate agent currently living in Annapolis, Maryland, and a few years back passed through the Gulf Coast when her husband was stationed in Pensacola, Florida. She talks with us about her dedication to the British TV series Doctor Who, and how it has been her comfort fandom on so many occasions.
Moving from Illinois to Florida, I had built up a little bit of like a friend group and stuff, but other than that, I was just kind of on my own. I had my dogs and the house, and that was it. I would really kind of immerse myself in whatever pop culture thing I could at the time. So whether it be an audiobook or TV, Doctor Who felt like this real way that I could escape, sort of like, that higher fantasy, like other world, while also being really grounded in these super important relationships that I had grown to be really familiar with. So whether it was between, like the doctor and his struggle within himself as far as like being a good guy or a bad guy and the bigger scheme of the Doctor Who world, or like between him and Rose or any of them. So I think that was really what it was like when, well, at least for me, being a teenage girl and you read a book and you kind of swoon over the love stories or whatever. And so obviously having my husband being a world away for all intents and purposes, for me, I could connect with these characters who I felt like I knew them. I'm excited. I feel like I don't get to talk about Doctor Who enough with people that also watch it. For the most part, it's me talking at my husband about it. So he's tried a couple of different times, but we always start with the Ninth Doctor. And that season, I think, is kind of tough for people who are not familiar with BBC TV shows to ease into it a little bit. So I don't know. We've gotten like into we'll get to the third or fourth episode of that season. And it just where he loses a little bit of interest, but not that he doesn't want to watch it with me. I think it's just he can't get into it enough, and he can't persist through the like kind of cheesier episodes to get to the really good stuff.
Especially when there's so much out there these days to watch. I have a hard time with that. If I'm right there, if I can't get into it after 2 or 3, once upon a time I was this person that I was going to complete something if I started it, especially books, TV, movies, whatever. It's not that way anymore. There's so much out there. I'm getting older. I don't have time to
devote to something you're not enjoying.
That I don't care about. There's so much more
sure
out there to enjoy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Give us a rundown, because Doctor Who is a bit of a obscure thing, I would assume, for most people. I would assume of many of our topics, people listening, this is probably one that
it's immensely popular.
People know it is, and people know about it.
They don't necessarily maybe know what it's about.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe it's not as, I would say it's not as common as probably Harry Potter or Star Wars for a lot of
it's so close
people.
To both of those things.
It is, but but for whatever reason, it's not as well known. So give us a rundown in your words, Taylor. What is Doctor Who, its qualities, and why should someone watch it?
So I think for years, if I'm supposed to give a book report, I give way too long of a synopsis. So I'll try to keep it brief. But basically, the Doctor is an alien. He's from an alien race called the Time Lords. And he has a spaceship that can travel through all of space and time. And it very frequently gets him into some kind of crazy situations, namely because he's got a lot of enemies for a number of reasons. And I think one of the most fascinating things for me, and one of the reasons why I would encourage others to watch it and really commit themselves to learning about it is because it's super rich as far as the history of everything. And I have a number of books that just give descriptions of other alien races and what planet they're from, what connections they have to the Doctor, what episodes they were in, what that has to do with the storyline as a whole. There's just a lot. It's basically, Christian said, it's very similar to Star Wars and Harry Potter, as there's a lot of fan fiction out there about it. There's a deeper world, comic books, all that kind of stuff about it. So if you're a nerd, if you're a person that likes fandoms and you were looking for something to really, give yourself to, there's a lot there for you. And then I think the best part about the show is obviously the companions, because the Doctor story by itself would be super interesting, but it would not be, I don't think that the series would be as long as it is, or as long withstanding as it is without the companions, because it's his relationships with humans and with the other characters throughout space and time that make the story so really compelling. And so I think, so obviously the show explores him having run-ins with humans who then want to be his companion, which is of course why they call them the companions, but they want to see what he's all about. They want to see the space travel, the time travel. He can take you anywhere in history, anywhere in space. And that's really thrilling. And it's like I can't remember the name of it, but it's like not the hero's tale, but where this, small person feels like they don't have a lot going on in their life. And it's the Luke Skywalker is presented with this grand adventure. And that's what the Doctor is to his companions. It's adventure. And then there's a bond, and then struggles and lessons learned. And also it interweaves he pops in to a lot of historically important moments in history, which I always think is funny and interesting and makes you think about if that's obviously it's not a possibility, but it puts you in that mindset of, I wonder if he was at this really important knighting of such and such king or queen or whatever it was. It's a wide world. I would consider it high fantasy to a point, although I guess maybe not, because it involves Earth, which is not high fantasy, but
I do think you bring up a good point about the companions, and I would just add one note to it is it's got a built-in point of view character in a world of bizarre sci-fi things. So the companion is you, the audience member, in that they're experiencing this weird, bizarre, intergalactic, mysterious thing, these alien races in space and time travel, and their reaction is your reaction. And while they each have their own story that, is individual and separate, like maybe I don't connect with Rose as much as other people might connect with Rose, but I can still appreciate what Rose is experiencing, especially in those first couple of episodes. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but the second episode, I think, is a great episode of that. Like what the Doctor takes Rose to the end of the universe and or the end of the earth. And the way she feels is the way I would feel in that moment. And so it's such a good concept, the concept of a companion in a science fiction story, because it gives the audience a person just like them while telling these crazy science fiction tales.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Taylor, when did you first discover or get into Doctor Who?
So it was always, especially when I really started watching BBC shows, probably 10 years ago is when I really started watching them. And at the time, Pinterest was at the peak of my internet presence. And so I would constantly see Doctor Who memes and things like that. And I didn't really know very much about the show. So that was my first kind of exposure to it and being like, oh, okay, so this is in the nerdverse of fangirl things that people really like. But I didn't really get into it. And I was almost not interested in it at that time, because I like a lot of Lord of the Rings, medieval dragons, stuff like that. And so sci-fi was not my biggest, Star Wars was about as sci-fi as I got. And then when my husband started deploying, I was like, what am I going to do with all this free time that I have? And so I started just binge watching any show that had tons of seasons. And someone that I worked with at the time asked if I liked Doctor Who, and I was like, no. And he said, no, like you really, if you want something that has tons of seasons that is super nerdy, you will love it. You've got to watch it. And I put it off for so long. And then finally I was like, I'm going to check it out. And so that was probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago that I started watching it. And I pretty much binged it from the time I started it until there were no episodes that I could access left.
Was Capaldi the doctor during that time?
I believe...
Was that before
Jody? Yeah, I think it was still when Matt Smith was. Yeah.
So you don't know me, but I am also a Whovian. I say this about a lot of topics, but the only topic we've ever discussed on this show that I have been deep in is Lord of the Rings. This is the next one.
This is the next one, yep.
Doctor Who. I have watched... Now, I'm not going to say all of Doctor Who because I have not watched all of the old school Who, but I've watched all of New Who, so Ninth Doctor on, at least 4 times, which is quite a bit of TV. Reagan, what is your experience level with Doctor Who?
My experience level is about 45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And earlier today. Actually.
You watched Rose, the
first 1.5 or first 1 and some minutes. Yeah, I've always, like you, Taylor, I've been told about it many times, and of course, Christian's tried to convince me to start it many times. Yep. My wife and I are always looking for new TV shows, and we start talking about it. He's like, you guys should watch Doctor Who. And I'm like, it's just so much. I have such a hard time committing to things that are also huge. And TV shows is one of those that I'm a binger when I watch. So if it's got 12, 13, 14 seasons, I'm like, I don't want to get started on that journey. There's other things I want to watch too. I don't want to consume the next year with this thing. So I put it off for a long time.
They are only 10 episode seasons. 13. I think the last David Tennant season is like 16 or 19 because they just kept pumping them out.
Well, and I also too at the time didn't realize. I'm like, it's how many 40 years ago?
We're almost to 60. We're at 58.
60,
Jeez, yeah. So I'm like, okay, that's way too much. But I didn't realize that I probably can't access most of that anyway. So in preparation for this episode, I said, okay, we try to experience the things we're going to talk about. And I was like, all right, it's good as time as any to give it a shot. So I did. I watched it this morning, and I am frustrated with myself for putting it off this long. It's your typical sci-fi stuff, but it's good. It's good. I just got into it, but I can see where it's headed. I can see how it can be enjoyable. I'm interested right out the gate. So
I did want to hit on a point that Taylor said, and I have a follow-up question to it. You talk about being into fantasy more than science fiction. They're my 2 favorite genres for a lot of the same reasons. And a big one is that the world that your stories live in is a character. So in fantasy and in science fiction, the rules that you establish, the things that you create, they are a part of the character, or they are their own individual characters. And so Doctor Who, for example, the ability to regenerate is a rule they created so that they could keep this popular show going on forever. Right. But it also has important plot connotations and cool things like that. So my follow-up question is, Taylor, why do you think Doctor Who is, of course, there's like a 20-year gap in the middle, but why do you think it's stayed around and is as popular as it is, even after all these years?
I definitely think, I think it's been around for so long because it's something that people identify, like it's just a pop culture sort of icon, like this wacky alien that doesn't look like an alien in the typical sense as far as science fiction goes. And also the component of the companions, I feel like is, like you said, how it's more the story than it is like the spaceships and the different planets and this like bigger, like wide world that obviously it's focused on Earth mostly. Of course, they go to all these different places all across space and time. And so I think it grounds it in the human aspect of just the story and these, like you said, the characters that you can relate to. And if you can't, you still really empathize with them. And it really just, then it makes you really curious. So that initial aspect of wondering like what's going on, and it's very confusing and I don't know, goofy. And then there's some really like heavy emotional aspects to it as well. And with the Doctor's backstory, with the reasons why the companions want to like travel with him and be a part of his like dangerous, crazy world. And so I think it's something that is persistent through stories for like out of all time. And so I think and then on top of it being iconic, especially with the Fourth Doctor and some of like the different iconic like cosplays and stuff that go with it. And I'm actually not really sure. I should have done some research on, because I know there was that big gap in between the original series and then bringing back like the Ninth Doctor. I'm not sure why they decided to bring it back up. I feel like I listened to a podcast actually where David Tennant spoke about it a little bit, but I can't remember what his response to that was.
Yeah, I know that I think it's one of those things where it's such a staple of British television for so long, and obviously it decreased in popularity, and a lot of that went into like budget and stuff like that, and they tried to bring it back, and that failed in the United States, and that failed, and then I think it just almost a bid for nostalgia, but also the opportunity, I think, because of the point you're talking about, Doctor Who is so wide ranging in themes and styles that they really thought, oh, this is a show where we could tell a lot of different stories, a lot of different kind of stories, all wrapped up into one thing. So there are Doctor Who episodes that are completely bonkers and funny and goofy and bizarre, and then the next one will be terrifying.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
And I love it for that reason. I love that it can be all of that wrapped up into one. It's definitely, I discovered it right after I got out of the military. I got out and I was on unemployment very intentionally. I wanted to do nothing for a while. And I literally sat in my room and I watched Doctor Who for like months. And it was the perfect thing for me at that time. And I love it to this day. And it's just a property that just means so much to me. Matt Smith was also the Doctor when I discovered that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I feel like every time I rewatch it, and I don't always rewatch it beginning to end, although I have done that a couple of times, but for a while it would be like, especially Reagan, when I was working at Roadhouse and I would be there really late at night, I was still on the sleeping pattern of being awake during the day because I was going to school and I had a lot going on. So in my free time, I would just be like working at my kitchen table, working on homework or something for Roadhouse, and I would have on BBC America and they would just be playing different episodes of Doctor Who. And that was just like the channel that I always had on. And so from the first time that I watched it, it came from a place of like curiosity and just learning like what Doctor Who was, what the characters were, what the themes were, stuff like that. And then the rewatching, I would get something different out of it. Like I would get something that I didn't get from the emotional standpoint of it the first watch. That's what I would get out of it the second time. And mostly because the more you learn about who the characters are and everything like that, you can apply different meaning to something that you looked at a different way the first time around, which is another thing that I really love about it. And so I feel like every time I've watched it, it's been what I needed at that moment in time, which I think is cool and different about a TV show.
Is there anything that you watched the first time that you didn't really like, that you've grown to like on rewatches, or something that stands out to you that the more you've seen it, the more it's improved or connected with you?
I think the Donna Noble story arc.
Donna is the best. Oh,
the first time I watched it, I thought, no, I could not get into it. I was like, she's just super annoying and I don't like her. And then the second time, I don't know. I thought she was funny and really empathetic and brought like an energy to the show that was different from a lot of the other characters. And so, yeah, that would probably be the most improved thing in the show for me.
Reagan, I don't think you will enjoy, if you continue to, I don't think you'll enjoy, because you don't really like Catherine Tate.
Okay.
And I love Catherine Tate, but the first time I was exposed to her is Doctor Who, and I love the character.
Maybe I'll feel different.
Maybe you will.
It's mostly because of, it's not her, I don't think.
It's what people ask of her to do?
Well,
because she's the same thing and everything. She's Catherine Tate all the time.
Okay. If that's, okay, then probably.
For me, it's probably the 11th Doctor. I was big on 9 and 10. Christopher Eccleston only gets the one run, but I think, for a lack of a better word, he's fantastic.
No, I agree. Yeah.
You're not going to get it, Reagan.
Nope. I'll get it.
You'll get it later.
Year.
You've definitely already heard him say it, I'm sure, but I think he's great in it. And I wish we had gotten more with him. And then, yeah, just David Tennant. There's so much just about that guy who embodies everything about Doctor Who. His father-in-law is a former doctor. He's in an episode called The Doctor's Daughter, and he's married to the Doctor's daughter. Like, he grew up a fan. Like, that guy, his life is Doctor Who. And so Matt Smith was hard for me to get on board with. Mm-hmm. But the more I watch him, he may be my second favorite. Like, I think he's really great in that role. And I just couldn't appreciate it as much as I probably should have the first time.
I definitely had that because David Tennant, 10 is my favorite doctor. And for all of the reasons that you said and so many more, I think that the writing during his stretch is just really, really good. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So his name, okay, I never knew this. I didn't think about it.
Yes, Tennant is the 10th doctor.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
Taylor, go ahead and say what you're going to say real quick.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I had a similar experience with your transition from 10 to 11 with Capaldi. So because then once I was in it for the Matt Smith storyline, then when his was over, I was like, what? Now it's going to be an old guy. I was like, could not get into it. And then he ended up being really great. But, and mostly just because I was there for the brand and the series and I was on board for it regardless. But I had a similar experience with that, so I can relate.
Yeah, Capaldi was hard too because he had been in the show so recently. And I guess it really wasn't that recently. It had been like 5 years, but it felt like I recognized that guy in Doctor Who. It's weird that we brought him back. But my other favorite David Tennant piece of trivia about his Doctor Who premiere is his first episode is called The Parting of Ways that he is in. The Parting of Ways is the last chapter in Goblet of Fire, which is the Harry Potter movie David Tennant is in.
I love that. I did not realize that. That's great.
That is backup. He's in Harry Potter?
He plays Barty Crouch Jr. in Goblet of Fire. Man, I'm a nerd. He plays
That's why we're doing this show, man.
He plays Barty Crouch Jr. in Goblet of Fire. The last chapter of that book is called The Parting of Ways. So Voldemort's back and everyone has to leave and everyone's scared. His very first episode of Doctor Who is entitled The Parting of Ways.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm sure that was intentional.
Oh,
if not,
it has to be
crazy coincidence.
It has to be intentional. How can it not be intentional?
Yeah.
Tell us of maybe a moment or a time where, because you said you've watched it a lot, Doctor Who has gotten you through something. Maybe
you talked about your husband's deployment.
Yeah, right? Or just can you tell us just about that for a minute?
Yeah, honestly, it probably would mostly be just when he was gone, because when my husband was deployed, because moving from Illinois to Florida, I had built up a little bit of like a friend group and stuff, but other than that, I was just on my own. I had my dogs and like the house, and that was it. So I would really immerse myself in whatever pop culture thing I could at the time. So whether it be like an audiobook or TV, and I feel like Doctor Who felt like this real way that I could escape that higher fantasy, like other world, while also being really grounded in these super important relationships that I had grown to be really familiar with. So whether it was between, like the Doctor and his kind of struggle within himself as far as being like a good guy or a bad guy, and like the bigger scheme of the Doctor Who world, or like between him and Rose or any of them. And so I think that was really what it was. Is it was almost like when you're like, at least for me, being like a teenage girl and you read a book and you swoon over the love stories or whatever. And so obviously having my husband being a world away for all intents and purposes, for me, I could connect with these like characters who I felt were like, I knew them. And so that definitely would be, I would, stay up late watching it and fall asleep watching it, watch it while I ate breakfast and whatever. So it was just the world that I lived in at that time.
And it became your, what's the word? Oh, I just lost the word. Wow. It became your, like not your center, but your grounding point. Your constant throughout every day.
Definitely constant.
That was that familiarity. What's a lesson that you've learned from watching
Mm,
Doctor Who? Something that's in an
good
episode
question.
that you've learned something.
I think probably it would be that just because a TV show is like underproduced, or maybe not underproduced, but maybe has some, I'm trying to think of the word for it, but I guess maybe underproduced would be the best. Like it's just cheesy.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it is any lesser than something, say, like The Expanse or something where it's so over the top, like crazy CGI and everything's really impeccable and it looks like it could be reality, or any other number of like sci-fi shows. I feel like it's more the story that matters. And yeah, I would say that would probably, I don't know, that seems like a base. If I thought about it more, I could probably think of.
No, that's a great life lesson too.
And it's also super applicable in the world we live in, where I think a lot of people expect so much out of things, and your expectations can taint or ruin your ability to appreciate a thing for what it is or what it has to offer, or a person. Yeah, Doctor Who, not only is it cheap and campy and cheesy, or at least it was, it's a very expensive show now, or so it looks. I love it for that reason. Like I don't know if you guys have ever watched the show Community, but Abed discovers a show called Inspector Spacetime, and after watching 30 seconds is like, this is the greatest show of all time.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I felt about watching Doctor Who. Like the cheesy campiness. And again, I watched a lot of like 60s, 70s, 80s era science fiction growing up. I'm a big Star Trek guy. It just connected with me immediately. And I do feel like I have to hard sell it because of that reason, where I could just accept it. It's, listen, I know the automatons in the episode of Rose, they look rough, but you just got to stick it out. It gets better. But
yeah, a lot of weird stuff gets thrown at you quick, but that's the appeal of that kind of show. And it is. It's out there. It's a little bizarre. Its humor is not as obvious. That's British humor, really.
Yeah.
But, so dry. But I think that honestly, I think I was mentioning this to my husband like a week or two ago. Literally, Rose, that episode, when the doctor is walking down the hallway and he walks past Jackie's bedroom, and she makes some sort of comment about, oh, there's a strange man in my house. And he goes, yes, there is. And she says, anything could happen. And he goes, no, it can't. And he just walks away. For some reason, that gets me every time. I laugh so hard. Like,
oh, man.
Jackie's a great character.
She's great.
Yeah, that's a good bit. That first episode, too, is such a great introduction to Doctor Who because, like we're talking about, it has the camp and cheese. It has the sci-fi aspect. It has the humor. And then there's just that great line where he's talking to Rose about feeling the earth rotating, moving through space. And he's like, that's who I am. Like, man, it's just, I'm going to have to go home and watch Doctor Who now. Like, I just rewatched it about 6 months ago, and I'm probably going to have to redo it again. Like I said here talking about it. Do you have, I know this is a big question for Who people, but I have to ask it. Who's your favorite doctor and who's your favorite companion?
So my favorite doctor is David Tennant. And I think it's just, he was made for that role.
Absolutely.
I think obviously he's so fantastic in really any role that I've seen him in, from, I don't know, Jessica Jones, even Barty Crouch. He does a great job. But, and then my favorite companion, I think, would be Amy, would probably be Amelia Pond.
Amy Pond.
I think it's just because she's very, of course I love Rose and I love the story arc between Rose and the doctor. And of course, like the devastating separation and all that other stuff. But sorry, Reagan spoilers, but
yeah, I just ripped my headphones off because I was like, I could hear where it was going.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. It's fine. I subject myself to this.
But I love Amy because I feel like she brings a different energy to the companion, where it's she's really spunky and very like obstinate towards the doctor, and there's obviously like a lot of, I don't know, respect and adoration and trauma and stuff that goes on through their story arc. But I don't know, I just really like the way that obviously companions come and go. I like the way that their story arc resolved itself. I was like pleased with it, as opposed to others where it seems either like abrupt or it seems not unnecessary, but just like more of a bummer. And I felt like theirs was like well written and well resolved. And so I think that was a reason why I felt okay about it by the end of it. I was still like bummed as I am with the end of when he regenerates or whatever. There's a level of you're feeling like you get to the end of a book and what's next. But yeah, I think she's probably my favorite.
There definitely was a thing for Stephen Moffat when he was the showrunner of Doctor Who, where he wanted his companions' endings to be as sad as possible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The pawns, what happens to them, and then Clara and Bill, it's just sad for both of them. But yeah, I feel like my answer is very cliche. It's probably Tin and Donna. Like that season 4, everything about it is good in my opinion. I enjoy it. I think the Christmas special before that is the Titanic one. From Alonso all the way through I Don't Want to Go. Every moment is great in my opinion.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, now I have to rewatch it. It's been a while since I've rewatched it. I need to.
We're on a deep dive right now. Reagan's just like sitting here like
trying to forget everything I hear. So
none of it makes sense, so you'll be fine. Doctor Who's been through a lot of changes, of course. That's a built-in nature of the show. Have there been some changes over the last few years that have gotten you excited or anything that you wish maybe they wouldn't have done? This fandom is such a weird word and can be taken to such toxic places, but I'm just curious to hear if there's some of the changes they made that you like and maybe some that you dislike.
Yeah, I think there was part of Capaldi's arc I was a little less interested in, although it's more like a means to an end sometimes. Yeah. Like, at least for me, like sometimes there will be stretches of, they're all fantastic episodes, but some of them are a little bit more like, it's a little bit more filler. And I felt like there were I felt like the most of those episodes were in the Capaldi era for me personally. So that was something, and that's more of a modern thing. But after that, I think everything else, I don't really have any large complaints about.
To your point, I think Clara went on just too long in that season. Like you said, it just drug out to get to an ending point, and that it suffered for it. How have you liked Jody's run as the Doctor so far?
So that's something that I'm really excited about, mostly because I have not had the opportunity to watch her yet. And I know I feel like I need to carve out some serious time to dedicate to that, because I was thrilled when I saw that they were going to do mostly, and not even for any sort of political or social stance, although that's obviously very like momentous, but mostly just because it's very different for a show that is then dominated by the main character as a male. I'm so interested to see how they work her personality. Do they let her be a female version of the Doctor? And you could even, give me some insight into that, Christian. But that's something that I have been excited for, and I definitely need to sit down. And although I'm one that likes to watch beginning to end, so I would love to sit down and watch from 9 all the way up to Jody and see the progression and get it through that sort of lens. But I'm definitely, because I love the little sort of things that they throw in, that some of his lines as he's regenerating at each point. And so I'd be curious to see how they work that into her as her character.
Yeah, I just caught up on Jody's stuff. It's all on, little plug for HBO Max. All of New Who is on HBO Max. And
is it? Yep. Okay, I didn't even know that. Okay, that's
all up until the latest New Year's Day special, which, if I did have another complaint, let's get back to the Christmas special. That meant a lot to me. My wife and I watched it every year together. And then since Moffat left and the new showrunners come on, which has nothing to do with Jody, but I'm sure it's the showrunners' decision, they've gotten away from Christmas specials and they do a New Year's Day special. And it just doesn't feel the same for me, because my family tradition was to watch Doctor Who. Like, my kids would go to bed and it's Christmas. Christmas Day is exhausting. And then my wife and I would sit on the couch and we'd watch the new Doctor Who together, and just don't get to do that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is a bummer. Yeah, I wish they still did them, because those were some of my favorites too. That's really lovely.
Great episodes. Though. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Reagan, you got any questions? You're so lost. It's just so much. There's so much information.
It is.
Okay.
You guys went super deep, and I'm just waiting to go watch them. I'll go back and listen to this episode after I've finished.
Yeah. We always end on the same 2 questions, but I do have one more follow-up. To Reagan's question he asked before we went on this tangent a little bit, if you had to recommend one episode to a person to watch to get them into Doctor Who, what episode would you recommend?
That is super tough. And if I'm being honest, my husband is chilling in the room next to me, and he's the one episode that he has seen that is out of order is what? The Man in the Fireplace.
Oh, yeah.
He loves that episode. It is a great episode. Don't get me wrong. I don't know that I would pick that one, but I guess for someone who has not seen the show and not the one that he would recommend, that would be a good one. But no, that's really tough. I think it would have to either be, I think it's hard to pick one that is one of my personal favorites, mostly because it would be hard to recommend someone, hey, go watch this episode, because to me it's important because of like the buildup. And so you'd need a lot of the backstory kind of to go and watch that episode. That would mean a lot to me. I would maybe say, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's the first one where you're introduced to the Ood. And I think the reason why I would recommend that is mostly because it shows a lot of the kind of deeper theme.
That was terrifying. Oh,
and it's really scary.
Yeah. The Pit, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. And I don't know. That's an episode that really always sticks with me when I'm telling people about Doctor Who. And there's so many crazy other creatures and planets and places that you go and see in Doctor Who. And for some reason, like the Sontarans and obviously all of the other kind of enemies and the Daleks, of course. But for me, like the Ood as just a side character, for some reason, always really stick with me. And they're light, so to speak.
Yep, for sure.
And that episode, I always really like. It's one that when it was on BBC America, if it was on, like I was sitting down and watching all of it for sure. So that would maybe be one that I would recommend for
maybe it's The Impossible Planet, and then the sequel is The Pit. There's 2 episodes. I don't know. I think it's The Impossible Planet. That episode is fantastic, and it is very scary. I always recommend Blink, because even though the doctor...
Oh my goodness. Yes, you are so right. Yeah.
Even though the doctor's not really in that episode, it's just such a fun episode, and has newly Academy Award-winning actress Carey Mulligan in it. That's the other thing I love about Doctor Who is, I watch a lot of BBC TV as well, and when I watch Doctor Who, because I've watched Game of Thrones, Doctor Who, and Downton Abbey, I feel like I know every British actor who's ever lived.
Yes.
I will be watching and be like, oh, you were in Game of Thrones, and you were in Downton, and that guy in the back was in Doctor Who, and that dude was in all 3 of them.
Isn't it great? That's my favorite thing about BBC is it's such a small pool of actors that you're like, man, you're all so great. I'm really happy to see all of you in all of these things.
I just finished watching Ted Lasso, and it's got one American and everybody else is British in it. And yeah, the whole time I was just like, oh, that guy, the whole time. And I love it.
It's really great.
So when we got started on this topic, let me try that again. When we knew we were going to be discussing this topic, I asked you, Christian, I said,
I included Blink on my list.
I've got to get in there and watch some, but I don't have time to obviously consume everything. What do I do? Where should I start? And your response was, and I'm just going to read it for everybody. Depends if you are willing to accept the low budgetness of it, then start with Rose. If you prefer something with a bit more budget value, then The 11th Hour. Blink is a great episode. Silence in the Library is fun.
I love Silence in the Library.
Yeah, so that's
one of my favorites.
That's what you said.
But that's to Taylor's point. That episode is good for people who are into Doctor Who.
Sure.
I don't think you're not gonna care what the twist is of that episode if you're not invested in Doctor Who, and you're not going to keep watching.
So maybe not for someone that's just checking it out, but that's a great recommendation if you really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's the first episode. Or if anyone's listening who's familiar, that's the first episode with River's song in it, and yeah,
oh, man.
I think it's great because I love River, and yeah,
I legitimately just got chills because River is, oh man. Yeah, she is just really so great. And I think if I could pick a character that the lines are most quotable, it would be River Song.
Yeah.
She's probably the one that, and actually Reagan, I want to say that years ago, you messaged me on Facebook and asked me what my favorite Doctor Who quote was or something. And I think it was a River Song quote. I'm almost positive.
Shout out to Alex Kingston, who played River Song. she is writing books now as Melody Malone, which she's writing Melody Malone mystery novels, which is a Doctor Who thing. And I think that is so awesome.
That is awesome.
Any episode with Captain Jack, also great.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, he is super fun in person also, because we have seen him at many a con, and boy, what a fun dude.
Yeah. I've seen John Barrowman, Alex Kingston, and Catherine Tate all at the Fish House here in Pensacola during Pensacon weekend.
Oh man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Reagan, you're looking at something, so
You must have just scrolled up our Facebook message when we first started inviting you. Is that what you did? Because
no, I really did not.
That's a deep memory. I had to scroll all the way back to I don't know why. I don't no idea why I asked you that question.
I have no idea either.
if anyone asked me what my favorite Doctor Who quote is, I absolutely would remember that because no one ever asked that question.
Well, I guess that's true, but I pulled up our messages and there it is. First thing I ever sent you on Facebook.
I say like our message history is very brief, I'm sure. So
yeah, I didn't have to go far, but yeah,
no,
I did.
That's what I'm saying. So it's
I said, what is your favorite Doctor Who quote? Why did I ask that? And then you said it's between Hello Sweetie and Geronimo. I don't know.
Yep.
If that means anything, but
one of those is River Song.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's so weird.
The other one's David Tennant, which she said was her favorite Doctor.
Geronimo's Matt Smith.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Alonzi is 10.
Yeah.
But yeah.
This is good content. Reagan checking on his messages to make sure we're both staying true to what we say.
No, that just really got. I was very curious because I don't remember ever asking that, so I had to go check.
I don't know why that memory. That's one of those little penguins that was slipping off the iceberg in my memory, and I just pulled him right back up.
Pulled it right back on because we're talking about it. That's awesome.
I'm trying to think about my favorite. I know what it is, and I'm trying to think of a way to say it without. I'm just going to say this. The person says, "The face of Bo, they called me." That's my favorite.
Oh, yep.
Which, if you probably makes no sense to anyone else.
None of those make any sense to someone who's never seen it. Like I'm like, those are not even quotes. Those are like one word or one line.
But in the concept of the show, when that character said the face of Bo, they called me, my jaw hit the floor.
Okay.
I was mind boggled.
That was one of those that I like. I feel like a lot of the twists in Doctor Who, though, like to be completely honest, I almost never see coming. I feel like they're maybe not all of them, but the majority of them, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I like that they did that.
And they're almost all entirely fan service. Like, even if they don't make sense, they're just to please the fans, and I am here for it.
That's the beautiful world of Doctor Who, though, too, is I 100%, my disbelief is always suspended. Yep. I'm okay with it. Just give me the content, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
And I'm just over here sitting here thinking if I could ever get in Time Warp, is that what it's called? What's it called?
The TARDIS?
Yeah, the TARDIS. If I could ever get in it, I'm going back to December 2015 and figuring out to watch myself. Why did I ask that question?
Good use of the TARDIS.
I just have to know. I have no idea. There's no context in that message for why I had to ask that.
Time and relative dimension in space.
Yes.
Oh, see, I know we have limited time, but that would be an interesting topic to discuss. Would be like where you would go in time or space in the TARDIS.
Well, certainly you've thought about it. Watching the show, certainly you've thought about it.
Oh yeah. Definitely. But I think it'd be different every time. Like every time I would sit down and watch it, I would think, or even if there's an episode where I'm like, oh yeah, I would want to go there. I would think that would be the place. And then the next episode would happen and I'd be like, oh no, I would like to go there. That would be really cool. So I don't think I could ever pick one specific thing because it would either be like super selfish where I'd be like, I want to see this thing happen. Or it would be like, I want to be a hero to the world, but then, I don't know, save JFK or something like that. You know what was happening and save him, but I don't think. But then, of course, that would have ripple effects. I don't know that I would try to mess with that.
That's why it only works in a TV show.
Yep, exactly.
So, Taylor, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and Doctor Who is a deep love for mine. And so I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it. We always give the opportunity to promote whatever you got going on. Talk about your stuff.
Yeah, I'm living in Annapolis, Maryland currently. And so I'm in real estate. That's what my main gig is right now. So if there's anybody that's listening that's in the area, the Maryland area, and you need assistance in real estate, buying, selling, renting, any of that, I'm your girl. I got you. It's pretty crazy out there. And I don't have a large Rolodex of clients currently, so you'll be pretty priority.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
I'm just getting started. I got my license back in January. So
Well, awesome. Again, we really appreciate you hanging out with us. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to Fantastic People. Please rate and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. To continue today's discussion, join the free Facebook group, which is Fantastic People Podcast Hangout, and follow us on social media. That's at fantastic_peoplepod on Instagram and at Fantastic People, no E, on Twitter. We'd like to say thank you to Alex Edmondson for our artwork and Brian Velasquez for our music.